I'm Lisa. Standing in the kitchen, looking at the chaos around me, I can't help but think about how far we've come. The sink is stacked with dirty dishes, the floor is littered with muddy footprints, and the living room is filled with damp clothes. It's been a month since I left that yellow sticky note on the counter, and a lot has changed. It all started on a cold November day. I had just stepped off the bus, my arms aching from the weight of the grocery bags. The rain had been falling since noon, turning the streets of our small town into a glistening mess. As I walked the final 2 blocks home, I couldn't help but feel exhausted. It had been a long day at work, and I still had a mountain of chores to do. When I opened the door, I was greeted by the familiar sight of my husband, Ryan, sprawled on the couch, watching TV. He barely looked up when I came in, and there was no offer to help with the bags. It was the same story every day. Ryan had lost his job 2 years ago, and since then, he had been living off my salary, doing nothing but waiting for the perfect opportunity to come along. I set the bags on the counter and tried to stay calm. I was used to this by now, but it still hurt. I had been carrying the weight of the family for so long, and it felt like no one noticed. I started putting away the groceries, thinking about all the things I had to do that evening. There were bills to pay, laundry to do, and dinner to cook. It was never-ending. As I was making dinner, Ryan came into the kitchen and told me he had an interview that day. But he said it didn't feel like the right fit. It was the same excuse he always used. Every opportunity was too small, too far, or too beneath his level. I didn't argue. I knew it was pointless. After dinner, I did the dishes, helped the kids with their homework, and prepared lunches for the next day. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my life. It had become a never-ending cycle of work, home, and chores. I felt like I was just going through the motions, and I had lost myself somewhere along the way. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. I could hear Ryan on the phone in the living room, saying he wasn't ready yet. It had been 2 years since he lost his job, and he still wasn't ready. I was tired of making excuses for him. I was tired of carrying the weight of the family alone. That day at work, I was offered a promotion. It was a great opportunity, but I was hesitant. I was worried about how I would balance it with everything at home. But then I thought about Ryan and how he had been doing nothing for the past 2 years. I realized that I couldn't keep waiting for him to change. I had to take control of my own life. After work, I met my friend, Lily, at a small cafe. She could tell I was exhausted, and she asked me how Ryan was doing. I told her he was still looking for a job, but he was waiting for the right fit. Lily snorted and said that men don't change because we ask them to. They change when the alternative hurts. She said that as long as I was carrying the weight, Ryan would let me. Her words hit me hard. I realized that I had been enabling Ryan. I had been making it too easy for him not to change. I had been protecting him from the consequences of his actions, and in doing so, I had erased myself. That evening, as I was riding the bus home, I heard a man on the phone talking to his wife. He was apologizing for having to cancel their trip to Charleston, and he was thanking her for being so patient with him. He said she was the most understanding woman in the world. The words pierced my heart. It had been so long since I had heard those words directed at me. I thought about Ryan and how he had stopped showing me appreciation. He had stopped telling me he loved me, and he had stopped making an effort. I realized that our marriage was in trouble, and I didn't know what to do. When I got home, I wrote a note on a yellow sticky note and left it on the counter. It said, "I have things to do. I'll be back tonight." Then I turned off my phone and walked out the door. It was the first time in 15 years that I had left the house without a plan, without an explanation, without anyone depending on me. The next day, I wandered around the city like a tourist. I went to a bakery and had breakfast alone, savoring each bite without rushing. I went to a bookstore and spent an hour reading novels. I sat by the pond in the park and watched the ducks. It was a strange, gentle day, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. In the afternoon, I called my father and asked if he was free for coffee. We met at a small diner near his house. He could tell I was tired, and he asked me what was wrong. I told him about Ryan and how things had gotten so bad. He listened quietly and then he told me a story about my mother. He said that about 30 years ago, he lost a big contract at work. He was angry and frustrated, and he stopped trying. He told himself he had it all figured out, but really, he was hiding from the shame. One day, my mother packed a suitcase and left for a day. She told him that if he didn't start taking responsibility, she would leave for good. That shock had changed everything. My father started taking whatever work he could find, and little by little, he built himself back up. He said that sometimes love needs a shock to wake it up. His words sank deep. I realized that I had been rowing the boat alone for too long. I had been enabling Ryan, and in doing so, I had been holding him back. I needed to stop protecting him and let him face the consequences of his actions. When I got home that evening, the house was a mess. Ryan was standing in the kitchen, looking like a deer in the headlights. He said he didn't know what to do, and that everything had fallen apart. I looked at him and said, "I figure it out every day, Ryan. No one ever asks me how." The next morning, I sat at the table with Ryan and the kids and told them that I was done pretending that everything was okay. I said that Ryan had 1 month to find a job, any job. If he didn't, I would make a decision about our marriage. The words hung heavy in the air. Ryan stared at me, shocked. He said he was trying, but I told him that scrolling through job sites wasn't working. I said that it had been 2 years of excuses, and I wasn't going to wait any longer. For the next few weeks, things were tense. Ryan started applying for jobs, but he was still hesitant. He was afraid of taking a job that paid less than his old one. He said it felt like admitting he had failed. But slowly, he started to change. He started getting up early and going to the library to use the computers. He started dressing up for interviews, and he started showing more interest in the kids. One day, he came home and told me that he had an interview for a client manager position at a building supplies company. It wasn't the executive position he used to have, but it was a job. He said he was terrified, but he was going to give it a try. I told him that being terrified was a good sign. It meant he was awake. I told him that I believed in him and that I was there for him. A few weeks later, Ryan got the job. It wasn't the perfect job, but it was a start. He started going to work every day, and he came home tired but happy. He started helping out around the house, and he started spending more time with the kids. Things weren't perfect. There were still moments when we argued, and there were still old habits that we had to break. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward. As I stood in the kitchen, looking at the mess around me, I realized that we had come a long way. I had learned that sometimes you have to take a step back and let the people you love face the consequences of their actions. You have to let them grow and learn, even if it's painful. I also learned that I was stronger than I thought. I had been carrying the weight of the family for so long, but I had finally found the courage to stand up for myself. I had finally found my voice. Looking back, I realized that that yellow sticky note was the turning point. It was the day I chose myself. It was the day I decided that I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. As I cleaned up the kitchen, Ryan came in and gave me a hug. He said he was sorry for everything and that he was going to do better. I looked at him and said, "I know you will." We shared a small, genuine smile, and I knew that things were going to be okay. We were going to row the boat together, and we were going to build a better life.